name's Mike CRADOCK and I'm from CRADOCK UK. Okay, we'll start with building the front shocks. So we'll need the front barrel of the piston of the shock body, a front shock shaft, the shock cap, shock insert, diaphragm, front piston, oil seals and spacer, and retaining clip, and also the shock ball end. Shock ball end, you will see, has a cut and a wedge on it so that it stops the bottom of the spring cradle from turning round. This is a good idea, but I remove the tip of this to stop it cutting your rubber bellow, so that when you're using this, I shave down so that it looks like this, so that you've taken the sharp edge off this, but it will still allow the cradle to insert and not turn. Just a little tip there, because using these the bladders or bellows, what you want to call them, is a must really, because this is what causes the damage to your shock seal if this is not airtight or relatively airtight to keep the dust out. And so it's important for the longevity of your shock and the oil. And when you see you've got grey oil, this is mean something's wearing or dirt is getting inside of it. If you open the shock and you have a nice bladder and the bellows are good and everything's clean, you know that no dirt's getting inside and your shock is operating perfectly. Okay, so the first of all, I take the shock bottom and I put on, and I use, so that you don't use any pliers on the shaft, because if you put any pliers on the shaft, you can put some scores into the shaft and this will cut your shock seal, and then you have a leaking shock and cause all sorts of problems. So what I do is I put the nut on there and I hold the ball end and I turn. It's quite difficult to get this lined up to start off with, but try and get that straight. You'll find that the nylock nut will go on first, and then you will start screwing the thread of the ball end with the shaft. Once the shock shaft is done up, you're looking just to cover the thread, so that you have no thread showing. This will stop any breaking at the bottom of the ball end. Once that's in, you'll have a good tight bond with your shock shaft and your ball end, and it's that strong that you'll be able to undo the lock nut and take off the lock nut to put the shock piston in. And so this is like that, and there's no touching and no damage to your shock shaft. Easy done. Okay, so we go on to the next part. What I'm using today is I'm using a 500 Kyosho oil in the front, and we're using a 1.3 angled piston. This is a standard kit setup. This is good for smooth surfaces and high speed surfaces. It stops the car caving in around the corners and gives it more pack on the jumps. You can find that you can be more aggressive on the jumps with this setup. If it goes to a bumpy setup, then we use the classic, as everyone knows it at the moment, as a 1.3 8-hole piston, which is very good all-rounder and a good setup and a good optional part. So once we've got the oil, I dip the shock body into the oil, so it's liberal, put this in, and then I take the first shock seal and with the oil on my fingers just rub in and push in. Then I put the central spacer in. All the lubrication helps, as you won't chip any of the O-rings. Then you put the final spacer in. Don't mix this up with the small metal spacer. Push that in. Then you have the shock retaining spring. Just clip this in. Try and use your fingers at all times really. It just pushes in simply, and there you have it. Then there's been a lot of talk about the spacers that we use inside the shocks. This comes in the kit for adjusting the wheelbase on your rear hubs. This spacer is a perfect diameter. The object of the spacer is it does your droop for you as well, and also it keeps the piston in the oil so that the piston is not touching the bottom of the shock body, and it's in the oil, has oil underneath and oil. Otherwise you'll get it touching the bottom, and it's some sort of locking effect, you know, with the oil before it hits, and this will stop double bouncing when you're landing off big jumps or small jumps, and the car will carry on as though it hugs to the ground. For the front shock we use a 2mm spacer on this sprue, so we'll cut that off. Like so, and we'll get the shock shaft, put some more oil in it, make sure it's just inside the shock seal as well, and the shaft has some oil on it and it operates smoothly. Then you put the shock spacer, which is the 2mm one, and just gently just push over with the spanner supplied in the kit, so your spacer. Then you have the metal washer. You put that on to the shaft like that. This stops the piston from pushing through. Then you make sure that you have the same shape on the piston as the bottom of your shock body, facing down, so it's flat at the top. Then you get your nylock nut that you've already used before, using the CRADOCK spanner supplied. Sorry about that, the nuts fell off. Put the nut back in and just turn. When you do this up, you just want to, so as soon as it hits the lock nut, you just want to turn gently round, and then just a gentle nip. You don't want to do it so you squeeze the piston, and then you should have a nice smooth action with the shock shaft complete in there, working good. Once you've done that, you can fill with oil, and again we're using the 500 oil in this. So what I do is I fill the shock halfway up with oil, and then I just push the piston up gently, not out of the oil, and then pull down, and this will expel most of the air, so that you're not waiting forever for the air to come out. Then I fill the shock so that it's just level with the top. And then I put in the CRADOCK shock stand and allow to rest. So obviously you will do 2 shocks like that. So I will leave that to rest, and I will do the rear shock. The rear shock the same. Cutting the bottom off the. Careful with your fingers with the scalpel. Just taking the sharp edges off, so that again this doesn't affect the bellow of the rubber for your protector. So again, obviously the longer shock shaft, and the O-rings again, shock seals, shock clip, and the rear piston is angled 1.4 and this is and we will be using the 400 oil for this. So I try and keep all the oils together the same. So we use the 400 for this, and again just pour in the cap, small amount of oil, and again just dip the bottom of the case in, rub the oil into there, then rub the O-ring with the oil you have on your finger, middle insert the other O-ring, just pushing in with your finger, doesn't need to have a little tool. If you want to use the tool just to make sure this one is the perfect end for this, so it doesn't damage anything, just push it down. Then you have your retaining clip, and again always use your fingers, don't use any tools for this, and it should just clip in as easy as that. With your shock shaft, again you need the Nylock 2.6 nut, just put that on the end of the shaft. Use the spanner. Just takes a little bit to get that going, but once you've got that in there, you'll find that the lock nut will turn first until it comes to the end of the thread, and then twist in until the end, and make sure there's no thread showing, but you don't go too far, just enough so that it covers the thread, and then you won't get any snapping. And again, because it's a good fit with the ball end and the shock shaft, you should be able to back off the Nylock nut so that it's ready, and no touching of the shaft again with any metal objects or any shock holding pliers. Again, just put some good amount of oil, make sure it's in the middle of the seal, and on the shock shaft take it out, and you'll find that that's nice and smooth again. Again, with the spacer, it's the right diameter to hold the piston off the bottom. On the rear one, because you need a bit more droop, we just put a 1mm spacer in the bottom,